So maybe you have dreamed of buying a piece of property in North Georgia, building your dream house on it, and having everything you've ever wanted, all for a very inexpensive price. Well, I do not want to burst your bubble, but I want to warn you that if you buy land in North Georgia, there's some very important things that you've got to consider so that you can build that dream house. If your dream is to move to North Georgia and buy a piece of property, I want to make your dreams come true. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at the top 3 things that you need to know about before you buy a piece of land in North Georgia. Hey everybody, my name is Tim Gibson and my channel is all about North Georgia real estate. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe if you haven't already. We're going to be talking about all kinds of fun stuff. If you're thinking about moving to North Georgia or if you are thinking about listing your home, please reach out. I'll be more than happy to help. My contact info is on the screen. So I do get quite a few phone calls, weekly or monthly or whatever, for folks that are looking for property in North Georgia. Part of the reason is because there's not a lot of houses for sale in North Georgia. We've actually covered that in one of our videos. Or maybe you just want to build your perfect custom home. What's the first thing you need to know about buying land in North Georgia? As you know, North Georgia is rural, right? It's a rural place. It's an hour outside of Atlanta, maybe 2 hours in certain places. So if you're coming from a more suburban or more populated area, the expectation is that land in North Georgia will be very cheap. Well, that's not necessarily the case. Number 1 on our list is that land is not cheap in North Georgia objectively. So what in the world does that mean? So to give you an example, if you were to buy land in South Georgia, let's say south of Macon, Georgia, you might be able to find 10 acres for, I don't know, $100,000, something like that, maybe even less, maybe $80,000. That's a lot of land for a little bit of money. Some spots, land is cheap in North Georgia, but for the most part, it's not. I would say for a place like Lumpkin County, you could expect to pay, I don't know, between $10,000 for a really cheap piece of property per acre, all the way up to maybe $50,000, $60,000 per acre. Why is that? We will actually give you a couple examples later in the video. Land isn't cheap. Why is land not cheap? Well, it could be due to the topography. It could be due to location. You can't quite get to the property very easily. It's not as cheap as you think. So keep that in mind when you are looking for a piece of property in North Georgia. Other things to consider when you're wanting to buy land and build in North Georgia is that the financing types are obviously different than buying an existing home. Number 1, you could either pay cash. Number 2 would be to get a land loan from a local bank, or you could take out a construction loan and buy your land with the construction loan. So on construction loans, you typically pay interest only and you take draws from the loan, and then once you're completed with your construction, then you refi into a conventional loan. Definitely talk to a lender a little bit more to get some details about that. Land loans are typically a little bit more expensive in terms of rates, and they usually require a higher down payment. So just keep those 2 things in mind. If you need some help, if you need a local lender to talk to discuss options with you, let me know. Number 2, and this is probably the most important in my mind, is that developing the land in North Georgia is not cheap. All right, so what are some of the costs that go into buying a piece of land and developing it? Just about any piece of property you find in North Georgia that is not developed will be on a well, and it will be on a septic system for your sewage. Let's say in general those costs maybe is about $10,000 or more for a well, and then maybe somewhere around $10,000 to $15,000 for a septic. Each case is going to be a little different. All right, so first and foremost, when you buy a piece of property in North Georgia, 99% of the time, those pieces of property are going to be on a well water, and you're going to be on septic for your sewage. But before you put your septic in, you're going to have to do a soil test to see if the property can support a septic system. A soil test usually is going to cost somewhere around $500 to $600. Okay, so then once you get your soil test done, you'll also have to drill a well, and you'll have to put your septic system in. I would budget somewhere around, I don't know, $10,000 to $20,000 for a well, maybe $10,000 to $15,000 for a septic system. Those are just rough costs. Of course, your specific situation may be a little different. A lot of the property in North Georgia is heavily wooded, so you're going to have to grade that property. You're going to have to take out a bunch of trees, you're going to have to cut in a road, and you're going to have to grade the actual location for the building site of the house. I don't have a great number to give you for grading a piece of property because those can be variable, but I would anticipate it costing $10,000 or more to grade a piece of property. Also, you got to get your utilities run to the property if you are planning on having power at your house. So you're going to have to factor in the cost from running power to the nearest power source over to your property. That could be a lot of money if your property is very far away from the closest power. So in some cases, you can actually find pieces of property for sale that have been developed in this way, and they've got the well in, they've got the septic in, they've got the power run to the property, and they've got the site graded. So what does that mean? That means that this piece of property is going to be probably a good bit more expensive than one that's just a raw piece of property with some trees and dirt on it. But they've done all the hard work for you. All right, so third on the list would be that the cost to build a house is not cheap. Unfortunately, we're not living in the 80s, or we're not even living in pre-COVID world anymore. Everything is more expensive. As you know, inflation has been out of control for quite some time. And building costs are expensive. Building materials are expensive. So usually one of the first questions I get whenever I have a client that wants to buy a piece of property and build is, what's the average cost per square foot to build a house? And that's a very tough question to answer. And anytime I ask a builder that question, they're like, well, I don't know. What are you going to put in the house? That being said, the range of prices that I hear from builders typically is somewhere around $250 to $350 a square foot. And that all depends on what type of finishes you use in the house. Are you using quartz countertops? Are you going to be using Formica or some type of cheap granite? So are you doing something fancy like a cedar shake siding? Or are you going to do something like vinyl siding? Are you going to do a standing seam metal roof? Or are you going to do an asphalt shingle roof? All of these things, of course, play factors into the cost of building your house. So let's say you have a total budget of, I don't know, around $500,000, and you want to build a house on 5 acres. That budget may not go as far as you expect. So that being said, if your budget is $500,000 total and you want to build a house on 5 acres, keep in mind at $250 a square foot, you can only build a 2,000 square foot house for roughly $500,000. But we haven't factored in the cost of purchasing the property. We haven't factored in the well, the septic, the grading, or the utilities. So make sure you just keep that in mind when you're looking for land to build in North Georgia. Okay, so just to illustrate and give you some real world examples of what land prices are in North Georgia, we're going to give you some Lumpkin County, Dahlonega, Georgia land prices that have sold in the past 6 months. Okay, in the past 6 months in Lumpkin County, Dahlonega, Georgia, 3 to 5 acres, 7 total properties have sold in the last 6 months. Average cost per acre is $11,000 all the way up to $57,000 per acre. One thing to mention about that $11,000 per acre price point is if you see a piece of property in North Georgia that is very inexpensive when compared to other properties in North Georgia, there's probably a very good reason. It's probably very remote. It might not have any good building sites. You might have to build a house off the side of a cliff. So a general rule of thumb is if it's very cheap and it's been on the market a long time, that probably means it's going to be pretty difficult and expensive to build on. All right, so next on the list we have properties that have sold between 6 and 10 acres. How many properties have sold in the past 6 months between 6 and 10 acres in Dahlonega, Georgia? 6 total sales. Average cost per acre of this size of property in Dahlonega, Georgia is between $12,000 and $33,000 per acre. Just to give you an idea, let's say it's 10 acres, $33,000, that's $330,000 for a 10-acre piece of property. All right, and last but not least, 10 plus acre tracts of land that have sold in Dahlonega in the past 6 months. We've had 7 total sales. And one thing to note is you're going to see this is a little bit different, but 10 plus acres, you start to see the cost per acre decrease. Yeah, that's very common. You're buying in bulk. So you're buying more land and you're buying it at a cheaper unit cost, so to speak. The range of costs that you're seeing here between the 10 plus acre tracts of land is between $3,700 per acre, which is very cheap, all the way up to $29,000 per acre. One thing I want to let you know is that $3,700 per acre price is very cheap. That was a 100 plus acre piece of property that had sold. It was almost 200 acres. So keep that in mind when you're looking at that unit cost there. All right, so what did you think about the video? Thanks for watching. Were you surprised at the cost of land in North Georgia? Or were you surprised at some of the costs that it would take to develop a piece of property in North Georgia? Let me know in the comments below. Appreciate you watching, and we'll see you on the next video.